Hi, this is Sadelle, and this is the first of what I hope to be will be a continuing series on art and spirituality. And I am sitting today with Sheila Garrett, who is a. I'll actually have her introduce herself, but she's the first artist I'll be interviewing on this series on art and faith. So, hi Sheila, welcome. And
Hey, Sadelle.
I wanted you to introduce yourself. Just tell us a little bit, your name again, and what your background, your faith background is, and tell us about your art background.
Okay. Well, first of all, yeah, my name again, Sheila Garrett, and I live in Putney, Vermont, and I'm a member of the Quaker meeting in Putney, and I have been a Quaker for a long time, so I've been a member of other meetings and a lot of different experiences in different meetings. So, and also very closely connected with New England Yearly Meeting. And I really, in thinking about this, have been realizing that I think of myself as having been an artist really basically all my life. Since I was a little kid, I loved to draw. And I had the support of a mom and a grandmother that used to stick things up on the refrigerator and on the walls and praise my doing artwork and stuff like that. So yeah, so I'd say that is really an important part of my understanding of myself as an artist. Yeah.
Cool.
I can say more about background and stuff. I've done studied art. Yeah, I started studying art really, I guess, probably in grade school, but then I studied art in high school, and then in college, I studied. I was an art major in college, and then I went on and took classes at Maine College of Art, which used to be Portland School of Art when I lived in Maine, and a lot of other places too. So yeah, I've had a lot of formal background as well as informal art background.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, Maine College of Art is a place that we got a chance to visit with my son once, and
Yeah, you
it was
said.
really, it looked like a wonderful environment to study in.
Yeah, it was a wonderful school. And I got to teach there too. I taught children's book illustration there for several years. So that was fun.
Right. Great. So here's one of the big questions for you is, was there, does your art practice usually take you to a place of contemplation or meditation or worship or prayer or some other form of connection to spirit? Is that something that you recognize within your own work?
Yeah. Well, when you sent me the questions, that was the one that I really zeroed in on, because that really has been such an important part of my understanding of art and my understanding of myself as an artist, is that it's absolutely tied into my understanding of faith and faithfulness, and the struggles too. I think really understanding that there's a part of me that sometimes it's really hard to believe much of anything, and and yet knowing that there's something there deeper and much more than just me. That's what holds me, and that's what propels me to keep going, and even when I'm struggling with anything, but certainly in art, that's a key element of who I am in all aspects of my life, but certainly in artwork. Yeah.
Um, and does it show up for you in a certain way when you're actually painting or drawing, um, as
Well,
far as
I think,
your that connection?
yeah, I think the words that come to me are awe and wonder. That there's a sense whenever I do any artwork that I'm going to a place where I've never been before. Or, I mean, certainly there's there's tools that I have, that I mean, there's things that I've learned, and that's an important part. But it's that excitement of going into something that is most likely going to be something that I had no idea it was going to be. is is that discovery part, I think, that's so exciting.
Mm-hmm. So it's when you're drawing, I mean, in general, it's usually you approach it with this sense of awe right from the beginning.
Yeah, and
Usually.
well, and also, I mean, sure, I do warm up exercises and things like that often, but just as important is to go, like go for a walk and just wander around and see what catches my imagination or whatever. And I never know what it's going to be. So I mean, nature has been always a really, really important part of my life. I've spent a lot of time outdoors, and I still do. That's my preferred place to be. um,
Mm.
and so, often when I'm drawing, I'm finding that I'm drawing natural objects, or something with that in mind, with that in my heart. Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's funny when I think of you and I think of, the art of yours that I've seen, it immediately just connects me. I just immediately think about nature because I remember when we led that retreat at Woolman Hill
Yeah.
at the Quaker Retreat Center, and trying to remember the exact name of the workshop that you taught, but it was about trees, right?
Well, actually, I think it was called Drawing in the Spirit of Nature,
Okay.
which is kind of a play on words, because it's, drawing in, pulling in, and it's also being in a spiritual place. And so it's using that word in all the various different ways. Um,
That's actually a great lead into my next question because I think of that drawing in the spirit and this past summer at Friends General Conference we had a discussion at the Quaker Arts Center about contemplation
yeah,
in
you told
art.
me.
And one of the things that came up while I'm just trying to find my notes here, but one of the things that came up was, as artists and as faithful people, do we first sit and bring that spirit in before we work, or is it something that we just allow ourselves to be open to it coming in as we're working? If you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think for me, it's both, because sometimes I have to stop and say, okay, I'm going to pay attention here. I'm going to be really consciously trying to invoke a certain spirit or whatever. But then there's that underlying part that seems that for me it's always there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I would say both.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know for me, I think it's both for me. There are definitely, I definitely am one of these, kind of fly by the seat of my pants. And then sometimes it's great if I can get myself into a space where I'll be more open to
Hmm.
noticing when spirit
Yeah.
comes in, and that's that sometimes is a challenge as well. So doing it beforehand is, or finding some sort of an exercise or spiritual exercise to do beforehand can be useful, but I don't always remember to do that. And have you ever, like had the experience, or, where you just sat down and had like silent worship for amount of time before you actually began your work?
There are times when I intentionally do that. Um, and I think that a certain amount of it, I mean, just in the same way that I have to sometimes really intentionally think about certain techniques, certain artistic techniques or certain tools that I might use or whatever. Um, there's a consciousness that I have to make a choice about. But then there's also, as you say, staying open to what might inspire me, or what might come, that I have no idea what it's going to be until it happens. And that's just as important as all
Mhm.
the tools and all of the skills and everything. I mean, I think
Mhm.
those are important too. And I think of those as gifts. I was thinking the other day about that word gifts, and what a wonderful word that is, because they really are gifts. They're not something that, uh, um, I mean, I don't feel like I am a chosen one or anything. That I remember, actually, when I was younger, what a struggle that was, that there were certain people that were treated as, these are the artists, and that was a challenge for me, because sometimes I wasn't one of those, and I always sort of, I was always a little confused, and also probably self-critical too, that I wasn't as good as somebody else or whatever. But I think that's one of the blessings of getting older, is that it's easier to shed that self-critical part. I think, at least for me, it is. I don't care so much about that anymore. So,
I'm so glad
yeah.
that you brought up the thought about gifts, because I know that, and that makes me immediately think about just wanting to ask you, what does it mean with that, and with that word too? What does it mean to be a Quaker and an artist?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I've really been wrestling with that one a lot, because of the history of Quakers. I've studied Quaker history and taught Quaker history for quite a few years, and that it's just, Quakers have had a really convoluted and mixed relationship with art over the years. I think, thank goodness and thank God, we're at a point where we are more accepting of art and artistry as gifts of God and gifts of the Spirit. Um, because there was a time when Quakers were really negative about art, that they thought it was not part of what we should be paying attention to. And I'm really feeling quite blessed that I'm not living in that time. So,
Me too.
and same with music too. I mean,
Right,
there was a time when Quakers didn't want to have anything to do with music, and
right.
uh, and I see them as very similar in my life, because I'm very much, I consider myself a music person. I hesitate to say I'm a musician, because there I have a little bit more of that, self-doubt. But music is always a part of me, and so similarly, I think visual art is always a part of me. It's wherever I go, whatever I do, whatever I see, I'm literally seeing. I'm blessed to have be able to see visually, and I see things, I think, through art, and see art through everything I see. And that sounds
Mm.
really weird, but I think, and so that ties in directly to me about all my notions of faith and spirit. It's all connected. And so it's all connected to how I see myself as a Quaker.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um,
Okay. Oh, thank you. Um,
and I just
yeah.
want to throw in too, because I'm a really, I think it won't come as any surprise to say this, that when I taught art, which I did for many years, I taught it from the perspective of that everyone is an artist, or everyone is a potential artist, whatever level you enter into visual arts on. Um, Everyone can do it. It's just a matter of developing the skills that you want to need to express yourself, um, in whatever ways. And I spend a lot of time with my students both developing skills, but also developing a sense of staying open. I remember we had classes sometimes outdoors where we would just lie down in the grass or the dandelions or whatever, and just let whatever happened happen. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. And that's making me think that, or remember that you taught watercolor quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned in some of the notes that you had sent me that you had come up with a prayer or an alternative serenity prayer.
Yeah, well, the alternative part of the serenity prayer that I developed is less specific to art, but it was just, do we have time for me to do the whole thing, just in
Yeah.
case anybody says, what's
It
the
would,
serenity prayer?
I think it would be a great thing to, bring
Yeah.
this to a close, to bring our interview to a close with.
Yeah.
I loved
Well,
reading it.
so before I say it, I'll just add that piece about that I used it when I taught watercolor. I used the serenity prayer specifically to address the issues of watercolor, because watercolor is a tricky medium. It does things that you can't necessarily anticipate, and that's part of the fun of it and the excitement of it is. And so the serenity prayer, for anybody that isn't familiar with it, is: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And what I did was I added on, and the compassion to do it all with love. And so I would use that then to tell students in watercolor classes about just the serenity to accept those places where the paint goes, where you're just not gonna be able to do anything but just go with it and see what happens. And then the courage to try different techniques that you maybe didn't ever try before and stuff like that. So yeah. So
Cool. Thanks. Thank you so much for
yours.
sharing a little bit of your time, and I know that you and I could talk a lot more and have
And
on this.
will
Yes.
undoubtedly. And thank you for asking me. It was fun.
Yeah. And do you, if someone were to ask about information about being a Quaker, is there a place online that you would recommend them?
Oh, I
Go?
always suggest to people that they check out the video series called Quaker Speak, which was started by John Watts, who was a colleague of mine at the meeting school when I taught at the meeting school in New Hampshire. And yeah, it's a wonderful way to explore Quakerism because it's very accessible, and there's lots and lots of different people's voices explaining different things. So I always say, hey, start there.
Mm. Yeah, that's one of my favorites too. I'll put a link to that
Great.
in the
Oh,
show
good.
notes.
Good,
So
good.
thank you,
Yeah.
Sheila. Thank you so
And
much.
come do workshops with us, Quaker workshops, either at Friends General Conference or at Woolman Hill or Pendle Hill.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Blessings.
Blessings.